Hello, I'm William Gallagher, and this is 58 Keys, which, as ever, is for writers like you and me who write on Macs and iPhones and iPads. Do subscribe. Well, it's just so much to cover. But actually, this time, we're also going to talk to a writer who uses this. Well, I say that. This is part of a series of 58 Keys interviews with writers. It's a special series. All of the interviews have been collected up together and put in a playlist here on the 58 Keys channel, so you can go watch any of them at any time. But this one, well, yeah, of course it's with a writer, and as it happens, one of my favourite writers. But this guy is also an actor, and as it happens, one of my favourite actors, even though he did, in my Doctor Who... I'll never forget that. You'll hear about that in a minute. Please meet theatre, stage, audio actor, radio actor, John Dorney. John Dorney, thank you very much for being on 58 Keys. What a treat.
Thanks for having me, William.
I'm obviously here, I want to talk to you about your writing stuff, but just at the moment, you're actually on tour, aren't you?
Yes.
Live from a stage, near enough. What are you touring?
I'm touring Absurd Person Singular by Alan Ayckbourn, sort of this classic 1970s Ayckbourn play about sort of three couples across three successive Christmases in three successive kitchens. It's one of his best plays, really. It's a lovely piece of work, if occasionally a little bit of its period. So, but then I quite like that in a way, because it becomes a kind of a living, breathing piece. The way audiences react to it now is not how they would have reacted in the 70s. So there's a line I've got, which is, broadly speaking, a man talking about upskirting, in effect. And and you can imagine that the audiences in the 70s would largely have gone, oh, that's just men being men, where sometimes now it's this audiences going, you absolute cock. Which I feel is obviously the right progression, the right way for the audience to react to the character. But yeah, it becomes a slightly different reaction, so it's a living piece in a way.
I realise, actually, as you said that, I haven't seen you in this tour yet, but I saw it when you did Ayckbourn's Absent Friends.
Yes.
Which is superb, and you're tremendous.
It's a great play.
Edgy, nervous character, constantly moving. But that reminds me, did you tell me that you wore a Fitbit on stage? I
did one. Yes, because he was a character, who was described as not being able to sit down, a jittery, restless figure called John, which is pretty much me in real life. So and I worked with that company before. So I thought, if the director reads that and doesn't think of me, I'll feel slightly insulted. Yeah, and I did wear a Fitbit to see how much distance I travelled just by jiggling over about an hour. And I think it was at least a mile and a half or something like that. It was a ridiculous amount of distance I travelled, but it was just he couldn't sit down and couldn't even, if he sat down, he was always kind of just shuffling awkwardly and just not being comfortable with it. It's great fun to do. So, yeah.
But exhausting, presumably.
A little bit, but then again, it's like, it's not like working down a coal mine. So it was only pretty much just an hour of doing it. And then, only exercise. I'm a writer usually, so yeah.
Well, look at that. Look what you just given me. You're a writer. Technology. What should we talk about next? I want to ask you specifically, am I right that you, we were just talking about you as an actor, but you're quite unusual in that you're equally successful, equally busy as a writer as well. When you're writing, am I right that you do everything on an iPad? Did I get that?
So I do everything on an iPad. I can't quite remember how that evolved, really. I think I used to have a computer and a laptop that I'd use. And then I bought an iPad, and it suddenly just felt a little bit easier and a bit more portable. So I'd started doing, because that's the thing of being an actor. So I've always lived quite far out of town and things like that. So if I travel into town for a day, it was either carry this enormous, a big Mac into town in a heavy bag and do some work, or just waste a day. So if I was had an audition in town and then we'd meet, I thought, well, I'll try and meet someone in the evening. So it's like a journey. I'm not wasting the journeys. And that would mean, I'd probably end up just not having anything to do in the afternoon, or I'd have to carry an enormously heavy bag. And so it kind of graduated to buying an iPad to do some of the work on that. And then it just felt like, transferring back and forth. I'm a bit of a technological Luddite, so transferring files back and forth almost felt like a bit too much of an effort. So it just largely graduated to just doing everything on the iPad across different programs, and different apps.
There is a story
and I'm not sure if you told this or other people said this, that you've been in plays on stage where when your character is off stage, you've gone off and written Doctor Who stuff before coming back on. Is that a myth?
No, that is true. I mean, largely I try to avoid that because, usually you kind of want to have a focus on one thing or another. And certainly, so the show I'm doing at the moment, I don't really appear for about 30 minutes. But I tend to use, and we have what's called the half in theatrical terms, where you turn up 35 minutes before. So there's a good hour or so of me having to fill time, because there's only so long you can warm up and only so long you can get changed. But I tend to focus on like reading and just like having books and getting through what I'm reading at the moment, rather than actual work, unless it's a little bit overwhelming. But mainly because I don't want to be. I think either could potentially distract the other, so I could get so involved in the writing that I forget to go on, or I compromise the writing by going, well, I've got to go now because I've got to go on, and I'll lose what I'm doing. So I don't want to get too much in that zone. But what has happened is I was doing The Caretaker, and the Caretaker had a lot of I was playing Mick in that, and there's a big moment in, I think, the third act, when the tramp character Davies is sort of long monologuing at him with the occasional injection, and every now and then my brain would just tinily nip off in another direction. It was a really specific beat, is the one I remember thinking. It was for a story I ended up writing called Beautiful Things for Jago and Lightfoot, and it was which is one of the Big Finish audios I've done, and it was where these characters were meeting Oscar Wilde, and I just remember having the thought about. It was featuring another character called Leela, who's been described as occasionally being a bit Pygmalion in space, and George Bernard Shaw, and having that moment of thinking, oh, hold on, was Shaw around at the same time? Because I thought of a joke, and then I went off and I Googled it, and this was before as the Wi-Fi was that easy. So I think it was before I had an iPhone, possibly. So it was just like properly searching on a knackered old phone to just check when my story was set and whether Shaw was around, in order to pull off the joke I wanted to do, which was basically doing Who's On First with playwrights. Because it was literally like one play. It was Heartbreak House, if I remember rightly, which is Shaw's first play, was the crossover, and just enough to do it. And I just ran off stage and made a note of it, checked the time, and just wrote down the joke, because it was this big going, oh, I saw that play of yours, I really that bad play of yours, I really enjoyed that. No, Widowers' Houses, and Oscar Wilde going, that wasn't me. Was it you? Are you sure? No, I am not sure. Well, if you're not sure, why are you correcting me? No, I am sure that I am not sure. What certainly makes more sense when you've written it down. I am sure. I am not sure. I am wild. Well, it's certainly very angry. I just wrote that a little bit down, just from having my brain wander to Bernard Shaw, just the tiniest moment. And every now and then, little bits pop into my head that I go off and make notes. And again, in terms of using, iPads and stuff, it's that obviously I can carry this to the theatre and occasionally do little bits and bobs if I want to, or write things down, because words and phrases just pop into my head from time to time, certainly.
Well, actually, something I wanted to ask you about was the fact that you are an actor and a writer, and whether they were separate muscles. But it sounds like they all come together.
They kind of do. I mean, there's a degree to which the writing informs the acting. I'm quite text-based, so a certain understanding of how writers write scripts is useful, I think, because there's actually one bit in the current play where my partner's just fallen over outside. There's certainly one bit in the current play where where if anything, I'm actually technically in disagreement with the director about the interpretation of one particular bit. And at least part of that is on my side because of how I think writers work and how a good writer, like, say, Ayckbourn, works. Because it's a bit where I think, well, if that's what he means here at this point, that actually is unplayable. Because a writer will put this bit in to change what is going on. And, writing is all about moments of change and, changing from one state to another. And that's how it develops. And a big beat that doesn't change anything, Ayckbourn isn't going to put that in. Because he's just really good. But we've largely gone with what the director wants, because it's his show. I did a play once years ago, a production of The Provoked Wife, and I remember during the rehearsals, the director called in this sort of text expert who spoke to various members of the cast, and I felt a little bit left out because I wasn't didn't get to speak to this person. And then it took me a while to realize that he wasn't worried about me. It was the others who were kind of, he was going, no, John knows exactly what the text means at all points. And he's like, because that's how I kind of go about it. And on the other level, from the acting feeds into the writing on the basis, from a script writing perspective, I'm very aware of the lines have to be sayable. And so I'm always vaguely testing out the rhythms of the scene. Because that's, and making sure that you can say them and that the breath is there and all of those kind of things that a script writer can occasionally forget. The fact that somebody has to be saying these words out loud. Also, on a purely practical level, I've always said, people ask me which one I prefer doing. Particularly if I'm I say it's whichever one I'm doing at any given time, because particularly if I'm doing both of them. So like this week I'm on tour. On Wednesday, I've only got an evening show, or don't have a matinee. And during the day, I'm just going to spend it writing. I'm going to go to a coffee shop, or I'm going to sit in my digs or whatever and just write scripts. And each one makes the other one feel like work. Because whichever one you're doing at the moment is the easy one. Because if you're like sitting at home typing, you just go, oh, this is great. I just have to make stuff up. I don't have to remember anything or shout. I can just sit just like have a cup of tea. I can do anything I want. And in the evening, you just go, oh, this is brilliant. I just have to do something I already know. I know every single word. I just say the thing I already know I'm supposed to say. I don't have to come up with ideas or think of things. So it just makes the whole thing feel really easy, and that they're both kind of like a holiday.
We've talked about Acheborn, we've talked about Shaw. Let's talk about me. The first time I met you, you did my Doctor Who, I think, called Doing Time. And the thing I remember very clearly is the character you played, you made him all sorts of things, but the most obvious thing was you made him a very Cockney character. Yeah. And I remember saying to you, he's very Cockney, isn't he?
Yeah.
And you said, yes. And that was it. The reason it sticks in my mind is I can no longer remember what that character was meant to sound like in my head. You totally replaced him by doing it in a way that was absolutely the lines, but a version of the character I had never imagined, and clearly the right version of the character. So finding the character in a script, as a writer, I think it's all there on the page, but I didn't put that there. So what's the process you go through of interpreting something like that?
I mean, it's usually just a question of seeing what my read on it. That's the thing. I can only do my read of what that script is usually, and usually it's kind of playing around with it and testing it until I find some kind of part of me in there. Because I think that's almost always I'm kind of more instinctive than anything else. I kind of just like bounce around it until I go, right, I think I've found him now. I think of it. So like in the play I'm doing at the moment, it's the physicality came quite late. So I took a while to kind of go, I don't know how he moves, and suddenly realised he's really leaning. I'm kind of always like leaning on things, and that kind of unlocked it for me. And it's usually just finding something of what I can see in the page. Because I think that's always the thing from a writing perspective. I had a few things that were kind of interesting when I was learning at drama school, because I did a duologue that was sort of co-written but largely written by an actor called Gerald Kidd, who went for years in Casualty and is lovely actor, lovely man, and we did our duologue, and there was a moment where the director gave us a note on one of the lines that were lines we'd written, and I just remember thinking, oh, that's not what that line means. That isn't. He's got a completely different interpretation of that line to what that line was supposed to mean. It's better than what it was supposed to mean, though. So I'm going to go with that. And it was this very salutary lesson of just kind of going. It's a very collaborative process. So from a writing perspective, it's like I try not to give notes on scripts of mine to directors or actors, because the director can only direct the version they hear in their head. They can't hear the version in my head. And the actor can only do the version that they can hear. So it's all that sort of feeding into that. So yeah, I try and hear what I play around with the script usually until I can hear the character in it. There was one I remember doing, another Big Finish audio, where I was a story about Sutek, if anyone knows who that is. where I was playing a cop in that. And it took me a long time. I was playing around with it going, why is this not sitting right in my head when I was reading it out? And it took me a long time to realise that I'm quite naturally quite fast. One of the things that Eightborn talks about, how actors very rarely change speed. So if you've got an actor who's quite fast speaking, like me, all of my characters tend to be quite fast. But this was one where I was going, oh no, hold on. If I go slow, suddenly the lines feel right. So it's like I wrote in big letters on the front page, measured. That was the word I looked for. So it was all going to be, no, it's got to be a little bit more carefully placed rather than my natural instincts. And it's weird. When I hear it back, I barely recognize myself because I'm so used to hearing myself talking at this pace. Usually, if I've had weird voice effects and things, I can often tell it's me because of the rhythms of speaking. That's one of the ones where I'm going, oh no, that's me, isn't it? Because I'm speaking a bit more measured than usual. And it's a bit hard to get my head around. But yeah, usually it's things like you're just playing around with it until I find a way of making it live for me, I suppose is the best way of putting it. And with whatever voice I want to go with or whatever kind of detail I want to go with. Because I think, that's the thing, it's for each individual actor. The actor has to play. I remember also having a conversation with a friend who will remain nameless, who went to see the David Tennant Hamlet. And he said he wanted to see absolutely no traces of the 10th Doctor in it because it was when the 10th Doctor was on TV. And he said he could see bits of it. And I was going, yeah, of course you can. Because every performance you see is that actor. And they will always bring an aspect of themselves to the part. It's their kind of... So Tennant's, again, fast speaking. Most of his characters will probably speak quite rapidly. Not necessarily everyone, but, and elements of that. So there'll always be certain shared characteristics, because it isn't the character as much as it's that actor playing that character, and their choices have a certain style, really. Yeah.
Actually, if it isn't clear, I loved what you did in that.
Oh, no, great. That's
so impressed with that. And that was my first one, and it kicked off loads. So I love that. Thank you. You said that about collaboration. Drama is collaboration.
Yes, absolutely.
Thinking particularly, you actually mentioned this, that you write on several apps and things on your iPad. What's the process when you are starting? Well, let's do Doctor Who, a Big Finish script. What do you write first, and what do you write in?
It's usually a synopsis. Well, actually, occasionally it can vary. It can be some people, some ranges. You kind of suggest a few ideas, and they go, well, this one, and this one we'll send through and develop that up into a storyline. Actually, we had one recently where it was sent through a relatively detailed idea because the actor in question wanted to look at the storylines before approving them. And then we didn't have to write a full storyline. And I'm not going to do that again, because that was a slightly frustrating one, because I thought, well, I've got enough to be going on with here. Got about halfway through going, I have no idea what happens next. Not a clue. And I'm so used to having done like a relatively detailed storyline. I've kind of got the storylining down to, because we have to basically do a storyline to send to the BBC and various other stages and producers and different things. And again, at different lengths. Usually the first storyline I do is, I say, write the first one as long as you need to make sure you've explained the story correctly. That's what I say as a script editor to people who send me scripts. And for me, it's got down to about maybe 2 pages for an hour is about the right length in terms of how I write a storyline. If it's about 2 pages, that'll be about an hour. So that's how I can gauge the structure along that line. It's a bit more variable than that, but it's usually something to be aiming for. And that goes off to the various producers until they approve it, and the BBC and so on and so forth. And then that stage moves into writing. And all of this I do in Word on the iPad. And so I write the first draft of the script in Word. Often I will say to people who are sending me scripts as a script editor, I will basically suggest to people not to do final draft, because I think that a lot of people will automatically go to final draft. But from my perspective, in terms of the stuff we do from script editing, it's an absolute nightmare, because there's just so much. Our formatting is really specific and not done like anybody else's. And so people have to put programs into it. And then if I need to adjust it at all, because we're working across different things. So some people work in Pages, some people work in Word, some people work in Final Draft. it just gets, it's so hard to like edit it or add lines or tweak things without the whole system slightly breaking down. You know, there are whole bits where with people's scripts I have to like copy paste some of the dialogue they've already got, shift it somewhere, and then rewrite the lines in there, because I can't do new lines within the work they've done. So I have to basically use the same, which is all a bit more fanning around than really anyone should be having to do. But yeah, I will still use Final Draft for other things, but it's figuring out whether it's the right one for the medium. Yeah, so that's in Word.
Actually, something unexpected there. I realise, I think of you as a script writer, but their synopses will be prose, presumably.
Yeah.
So you're actually a Doctor Who short story writer as well.
Yeah, in effect, yeah. Though obviously I always say to people, you know, I never particularly want to share the synopses on the basis going, you know, if the best version of that story, occasionally people will kind of go, well, I'm not sure it kind of works. And you go, yeah, because it's a synopsis. It's not intended to be released. If this was the best version of this story, we'd release this.
Yes.
So yeah, it's kind of got. I will occasionally drop in little bits of dialogue and stuff if I feel it will sell the story. If it's me, often it's just me making a note to myself of going, and this is going to be in there. Usually as well, I copy paste the entire synopsis and plug it in the script document, so I know what I've got to cover. You can also get in a weird habit, I think, and I know at least one of our mutual colleagues, a guy called Alan Barnes, who I remember talking about this from his script. He wrote a storyline, and there was one bit where he was writing out the script, and he just was looking at the storyline and go, why is this in it? I don't need this bit. I can just cut this bit. And then when he got to the storyline, the script and storyline of episode 4, he's going, that would be because I needed it for the finale, wasn't it? Yep, I should not have done that. Because you can occasionally do this thing of going, I remember this story, and then read the synopsis again, because you might forget what you've done and why. Because often it is a while along, you know, because, you know, even if it's gone through approvals or whatever, usually, I mean, I write quite quickly. I tend to have this slightly, we don't often get any issues with the BBC. So often, I'll often have written the entire script before it's even gone to the BBC for approval, just because I work on such a treadmill. That I tend to feel, okay, if I've got to get the ones I need to get done, I can't wait, because structuring plotting is the bit I hate, and is the bit that's for me the really long bit of the process. Coming up with the initial idea, absolutely love that. That's the bit going, I can do this, and then writing the script, love that. That's just, you know, that kind of comes quite quickly. The bit in the middle where you're just going, I want the story to work, is agony. Where it's just that sense of it being close to something that you really like, and you're just kind of aware it's not there yet. The one I'm doing at the moment is I've got the beginning and I've got the end, and I love them. And just the bit in the middle, from getting from there to there, just going, I'm not sure how to do that, and I'm getting closer all the time. And it's this tantalizing frustration of it. I can feel it being really good in my head and just going, but it's not yet. And that bit is blood, sweat and tears, and just shouting at a blank screen and walking around parks endlessly, getting frustrated at nothing bloody happening. And in your head, you're just going, no, just, it can. And then, fortunately, I had a long drive yesterday with my partner, and I just said, let's brainstorm a bit. And she just asked one question that just made me go, and then just it led me to a series of little beats back. We're going, okay, it's still not there yet, but it's getting a lot closer. And so these things can come from anywhere, really. Yeah.
Of course, I want to ask what the story is and when it's coming out, but we'll stop there. I won't.
I'll tell you off. I'll tell you off stories.
Okay. Let me end with this then, because it suddenly occurred to me that when you said treadmill there is a similarity between acting and writing in that generally, I presume, it's very unpredictable. But you are touring for a few months, so you know what you're doing for that. You've got a script in play. Do you know what's happening much further after those?
I mean, writing-wise, I think it's something ridiculous, like about 13 I've got promised. Though that is... that's like a lot of those have been on the promised pile for at least 2 years. So things get bumped around you to change. So I think the next one I'm writing is one that literally I've only had to be doing for about like a fortnight because somebody dropped out of a thing, and you're going, okay, I should probably write that. I need to fill in that space there, and that can happen. There can be sort of the emergency fill-in thing, and then you veer away from that and you do something else somewhere else. Acting wise, it's obviously very vague. So that, and particularly at the moment, but so I feel, if anything, quite blessed. We've had this tour. As I was casting it initially 2 years ago, did 3 weeks of it on the road last year after 4 weeks of rehearsal, and then we were canned for a year and a bit. And it's all the same people as last year, because we all had an utterly lovely time, and it's the nicest possible collection of people you could want to be traveling with. We're all a bit kind of loyal and friendly towards each other, and we have a delightful time. It's genuinely the nicest cast I've ever worked with, and that's no disrespect to the others. It's just this one is exceptional, like absolutely exceptional. I tend to recommend actors, if they hit like 3 marker points, which is good, hardworking, and nice. And this is literally the only time it's like, well, everyone, like every single one of them, which has never happened before in my professional career, where it's literally every single member of the cast is good, hardworking, and nice.
Before I start asking about particular actors, let's stop there. John Dorney, thank you very much for being on 58 Keys.
Thank you for having me, William.
Right, so John Dorney. No, actually, sorry, I have always wanted to say this. John Dorney is currently appearing in Absurd Person Singular by Alan Ayckbourn. Actually, if you're watching this around the time it's made, about August, September time 2021, so you look in the links below for the tour schedule, see if he's coming near you in the UK. But whenever you're looking and wherever you're looking from, I look in the links as well for connections to John's other work, particularly his amazing Doctor Who writing for BBC and Big Finish. Thank you to John Dorney for being on this. Thank you very much to the UK's Arts Council for their help in making these special interview episodes. I'm very grateful for that. And thank you to you too for watching. Now, take care of yourself, write more, and I'll see you soon.